Hi, it's Alison for the Bar Exam Toolbox. Today, Lee and I are talking about a topic we have been thinking a lot about, which is focus, deep work, and how to make sure your brain is primed to work hard and get stuff done when you're studying for the bar. All right, Lee, well, why are we here?
Well, the bar exam is a time when you need to have clear thinking, mental focus, and be able to learn quickly and efficiently. However, we've been feeling recently that our daily life is really just not set up to do that. So I wanted to take some time on this podcast to share what we have been learning about and why we think it's important for bar takers. So let's start with our new favorite topic to discuss, which is distraction. So, confession time. Alison and I have been recently feeling very distracted. And like our focus isn't where it needs to be. And we have some big work projects that we're working on that require a lot of focus. So we were sitting at a coffee shop last week and we were talking about distraction and specifically social media. And we did this crazy task, which was open up our phones and honestly admit to each other how much time we spend on social media every day. And it was sobering.
It was a lot. It was really a lot. We were like several hours a day, 10 plus hours a week. And if I think about trying to do any big project or, definitely trying to study for the bar, I just don't feel like I could spend 10 hours a day doing something that's so distracting and causing zero value to the actual project.
No.
So, I mean, I know that we've talked before kind of conceptually about how it's a good idea to track how you're spending your time and all these things, but that is available to you now on your phone. And I think if you're thinking about organizing your bar study, you've got to kind of pull that up and get real about it, like real fast.
Yeah. I mean, 10 hours a week is 40 hours of studying a month. That's an entire extra week of studying.
Just
That's
to put
insanity.
That is also 10% of the overall time that you would need to study, presumably for the exam, if you're doing the classic like 400 hours. That's 10% of your study time in 1 month for the whole exam period that you are giving away to social media.
And you're not just giving it away to social media, it's making it harder to focus and work when you go back to studying. I think that is, that is the part that really gets me at my core. Is not only is it a time waster, it's making me less productive, less focused, more anxious, and not as good of a worker the rest of the time, or probably a person, really, if I throw it all out there.
Right. And we both have looked at this book that calls me out the crumpled paper that you gave to me that's kind of based for boys and, kind of high school aged and elementary, whatever. But her point, which I really took away from that book, is when you are more focused trying to do work, it opens up more time for other things.
Yes.
So that for me was the really So if you can sit down when you're studying for the bar and get your work done, you can go do something else. That was the takeaway.
Which, honestly, that was kind of how people told us to study for the bar. But a lot of people didn't do that. I remember a moment when I was studying for the bar. It was during the July freakout, which if you have read or listened to a lot of our content, you know that in the summertime for the bar season, around the 4th of July, everyone freaks out. And so it was close to the 4th of July freakout, and I came home from studying. I used to come home from the library about 6:30. And I was living with my now husband. And I had a meltdown. I was like, I can't believe I'm leaving the library. My friends are all telling me how they're studying until 10. And I'm not studying as much as they are. And so I'm definitely going to fail. And his response was, well, didn't you do this in law school too? And I was like, well, yeah. He's like, weren't you doing really well in law school? I was like, didn't I just go to your law school graduation where you graduated with academic, honors? I was like, oh yeah. And he's like, why would this be any different? Always take someone from the outside to just clarify situations for you. But I think that the culture of anxiety that comes up with the bar is bad no matter what. So that was just really pre-massive social media, where the only anxiety I was absorbing was the anxiety of other people in my law school class who were all hanging out at the library together. Now, if you would like some collective anxiety,
Ooh, yeah.
you can find it anywhere. You can find it on TikTok. You can find it on Reddit. Oh my goodness. The bar anxiety on Reddit is a lot.
Very, very
I check in
high.
on it periodically. Like, it's a lot. There are Facebook groups. Like, if you want to find that collective anxiety multiple times a day, it is really possible. So yeah, I mean, it's like, and that does something to us. And so it is about distraction, but it's also about, like managing your own workload and staying true to what works for yourself and knowing that about yourself. You did graduate from law school. You learned some stuff, but it all seems to get lost in the noise around the bar exam.
Right. I think that's absolutely true. Like, the reality is people pass the bar studying in all kinds of different ways. But where we consistently see people not pass is when they just cannot, for whatever reason, really sit down and do the work. And sometimes it's life distraction. Sometimes it's, you're working and studying. Like, these things are all hard, but we work with people all the time who work and study and pass. And then we work with other people who don't. And, we get feedback throughout the bar season from our tutors about how are your students doing? Are there any ones that you're concerned about? And I would say most consistently, the concerns are either this person cannot tear themselves away from work to focus, or they cannot tear themselves away from this life problem to focus, or for whatever reason, they just can't focus and get things done. Like, it's almost always in that category.
I also feel like that the dialogue has really changed, that our focus is just bad now. It's just that no one has focus. Everyone's distracted. I mean, how often do we hear that? We're all distracted. We all have attention deficit issues. I mean, honestly, I've said that on this podcast, right? But I think, I'm not criticizing anyone. But the reality is there's a reason why we are living that life now. And it exists mostly on the devices that we hold in our hands. And they are designed to interrupt our focus and pull our attention away. And anytime you're going to do some Herculean task like studying for the bar, you need massive amounts of focus. And if your energy is being spent just to try not to check Instagram or Reddit or TikTok or whatever is your dopamine drug of choice on your phone, that energy should be spent other places. So one of the experiments I did this summer is I decided I wanted to read more and spend less time on my phone. Haha. So it's good that we didn't check our screen time back in May.
Right.
And so I challenged myself to read 8 books in 9 weeks. And, that doesn't sound, it sounds like a lot, but really when I was reading, it's not that much. But it does require being able to sit and read for long periods of time, in some sittings. In the beginning, it was incredibly hard for me to read for 30 minutes. I'm embarrassed to say that because I am an avid reader. I am educated in topics which require massive amounts of reading. So one would think that I could easily do that. Yet it was becoming difficult to just sit with a book. I like paper books. Sit with a paper book, put my phone down, and just focus. By the end of the summer, I could focus for 2+ hours and not even notice. So turns out I'm not broken. It turns out I've broken myself and that you can get these skills back. So hopefully, because you've been in law school, maybe you have better attention skills than I do, but maybe you don't. And maybe the bar exam is really putting you in that pressure cooker. And I think it's an important message to realize that through some focused effort of detaching yourself from some of these distractions, you can be better and then work less because you're more productive and you're actually retaining what you're doing.
Right. Yeah, I read something interesting. We've been reading a lot of books on this.
Yes, we have.
I think this might have been Digital Minimalism, but I can't quite remember. But it was talking about how the original iPhone was intended just to basically play music and be a phone. And they went back and watched the keynote of Steve Jobs announcing this product that he was so excited about. And he's like, it is a phone that plays music. It's a really good phone. We're really excited about the visual, the voicemail or whatever on this phone. But it was never intended to be what it has become. Once the App Store got created and all these things started showing up there. But even the person who came up with this did not intend for people to be spending, literally in some cases, I was spending 8 hours a day on my phone. Horrifying.
Yeah, it's really sobering.
It's really sobering. So if somebody's listening to this and you're thinking about bar study, I would really encourage you to consider very seriously what you need to, like you said, detach from. Is it you need to go cold turkey on social media and Reddit, and whether it's YouTube or gaming, like we all have our things and they vary, but there's probably something that you're spending at least, say, 1 to 2 hours a day on that you could detach from and have your brain be clearer, and also get back an hour or two a day that you could study or do something else.
Right. Honestly, if your study is more productive, so you don't have to study more hours, and then your outside study time isn't as distracted, like that
So you can
sounds better.
sleep.
You could sleep. You could see a
know,
friend. You could go to dinner,
go
take
to
a walk.
yoga, take a walk, go to the gym. Like all of these things are going to just free up like that mental energy so that you can actually focus on something.
Yeah.
And, I know a lot of people are saying, well, I have ADHD, blah, blah, blah. I'll be honest, I'm talking to a psychologist next week to figure out if I might have ADHD, because the more people I talk to, the more times I think, that sounds familiar. But that doesn't mean that, like, we're all doomed. It means that you have to be even more careful and more protective of the things that are distracting you and making it hard for you to get things done.
Yeah. I mean, our attention is becoming a commodity.
Yeah.
And we have to be very intentional about where we stick it, especially when you're doing something that requires large mental lifting. I also think it's really critical if you are anxious about this experience. And in reality, who's not? Everybody's anxious about the bar exam. Turns out social media doesn't do great things for anxiety. I think we know that. For children, we can be pretty sure about that in adults. I don't even have to mention I have read like a stack of books on this topic, right? But I will say that one of the things that got me was over our week. This is our first week of our digital detox. And I have an Aura ring, which like tracks your stress throughout the day. And I used to scroll in the mornings after I would get up, and scroll at night before bed. And my stress level in the mornings, now that I have been reading a book instead of scrolling, is lower every day. Because I do not start my day with bad news, with bombardment of information, much of which I don't use, with salacious things that are meant to get an emotional reaction, because that's what they're trying to do. And it's a much better way of being.
Now that you mentioned it, I was looking at my health data last night, and I noticed my resting heart rate seemed like quite low for the past week. I wonder why that was.
I know. I really think that we are allowing these tools, which can in many ways seem innocuous, to have a huge influence over our ways of being.
Yeah.
And if you're in a stressful situation, so the bar is stressful, you're asking a lot of yourself, and you're asking a lot of yourself emotionally, maybe you should remove anything from your life that doesn't serve that. And I would guess that social media use does not serve that.
Yeah. I'm going to say that's probably true. Well, the other thing, up next on our list to talk about was the idea of task switching. So, everybody likes to think they can multitask. And let's be honest, multitasking is as simple as taking a glance at your phone while you're supposed to be reading something. If you're there, you're studying, you're doing your thing, you're reading an outline, whatever. Whatever your study for the day is, the second you go, bing, now you've task switched. Our brain is not great at that. So every single time, and your phone will also, I've learned this week, will tell you how many times you picked it up in that day.
Sobering.
Horrifying. And it'll show you how many notifications you've gotten. Also very disturbing. But if you think about that, and I'll be honest, mine is it's over 100 of both each day. But every single time I'm doing that, I'm switching. If I'm looking at it, I'm switching back. 100 plus times a day, I'm just like taking my focus away from something. And I might think, oh, that was nothing. But it takes minutes and oftentimes for your brain to go back, and you've got to find the place on the page of what were you reading and the working memory and what was I thinking about. Think about how inefficient that is.
Yeah, it's really inefficient. It's going to take you significantly more time to get a task done. And if you're trying to learn something, every time that you pick up your phone, you are interrupting the learning process, which is not conducive to learning. You need to be able to get into a deep intellectual state to be able to internalize information. I would also think that, all this time people spend like passively watching videos, and then I'm sure you interrupt those videos because they're boring with your phone. Like, there's no way that you can go back and forth. And here's the thing. I get it. I'm a parent. I appreciate that, like, I don't shut my phone off as much as I do because, like, my kids are at school. And if there's something that happens at school, the school needs to call me. But you know what you can do, which I do when I travel, is you could set very specific rules on your phone about when it will give notifications. So much of the time, I treat my phone like an actual phone and make it make noise so it can be somewhere else from me while I'm working. And then I'm just like, these are the phone numbers or the people that you're allowed to ring or get texts from. It could be my kid's school. It could be my husband. It could be my parents. It can be, it's Alison. It's like, these are the people I would prefer to be interrupted by. Anyone else, don't interrupt me. Right. Anyone else. And that cuts out a lot of the noise, but we really don't think about taking these devices and bending them to our will. We're really thinking about them as like they are changing who we are as people. And that is really freaky.
Yeah. Like, I literally thought I had basically turned off notifications on my phone. Like, I don't let most apps notify me.
Mm-hmm.
I still get like 200 a day.
Yeah. That's a lot.
A lot.
It's a lot. Mm-hmm.
It's just like, whoa, what? I mean, I was shocked. I could, like, it seems to be a recurring theme with my, like, monitoring my phone use. I was shocked by all of it. I was like, how many times am I touching it and picking it up?
Mm-hmm.
That can't be right.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I know. So
it's right. They don't lie.
I know they don't lie. I also think it's interesting because, a lot of students tell us that the Pomodoro method or the circles method, it's just a variation of that, really works for them.
I'm a fan.
And that's when you spend like, it could be 45 minutes, it could be 50 minutes, but you have a set amount of time that you focus, and then you get to take a 5-minute break. When researching how this is still a very popular way to study, I had seen that now people are saying you can take that 5-minute break, but you must not look at your devices.
Yeah. No, because that's going to take you out of the mindset.
Right. It like undoes the work and interrupts too much of the flow, which is the next thing I want to talk about. And so sometimes I think it's like, well, yeah, but I have, maybe somebody saying I have ADHD and so I need to work in tiny chunks. Cool. I think that can be a really effective way for someone with ADHD to study. And what are you doing on the breaks? Because I bet that is just as important as what you're doing during the study time.
Right. Or even more so. I mean, if you imagine study for 45 minutes and then take even a 15-minute break, that you're walking around, maybe even you go get, a coffee or something, but you're not going to use your phone. And your brain is actually, that's when you're starting to process a lot of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you're starting to like make those neural connections. You're starting to embed it in your memory. But if you short circuit that by immediately having outside input, you're not really getting the full benefit of that break or of the study time.
Right. So this all relates to this idea of flow. And, like I said, we've been reading a lot of books on this topic, but we know that flow is important. Flow is where time passes super quickly and your attention is completely engaged in what you're doing, but you're not stressed out. Like, it's not a panic state. It's like a productive, positive state. And when you're in the flow, your brain changes. Levels of certain neurochemicals in your brain, like dopamine, which is our feel-good emotion, or our feel-good chemical, I guess, they spike. So you feel good about being productive. We've all had this experience of like, wow, I got so much done in XYZ time, right? Also turns out that's when you can learn stuff, is when you're in that state of flow. But what interrupts that flow is the phone, is the distractions, is this new information coming at you that your brain has to sift through. And it just means that the time that you're putting in isn't getting its full benefit. And that makes me sad, because if you're spending 400 hours of your life, that is so much time. You want to get the benefit of those 400 hours. Don't spend 500 hours to get the benefit of like 300 hours because you're constantly being interrupted.
I think that's so true. And that's the part I come back to is like, I know some of this sounds like, oh, so boring. And like, you guys are just like, oh, such fuddy-duddies. But the real reality is if you can find ways to be more efficient when you are studying, you can study for less time and get the same result.
I know. And who doesn't want to study and work less? I do.
I'm very lazy. Like I've like got a whole blog post somewhere about Napoleon apparently had a theory. And he's like, the people I want to have in charge of my army are the people who are smart and lazy. Because those people are figuring out how everyone can do less work to get the same result. Well, I'm telling you, if you are smart and lazy, you should focus on the time you are studying, and that will create huge benefits for the rest of your life.
Yes. All right. So we've talked a lot about, what sort of state you need to be in to productively study for the bar. We've talked about what takes you out of that state. We've talked about, all the task switching and the time on social media. So now let's flip it to something more positive and active. So instead of what not to do, what should we do to optimize your bar exam study and get the most out of the time and effort that you put in?
Number one, I think really seriously consider taking a complete social media break. Yeah. I mean, you could argue, and we had this conversation at the beginning of our week about maybe put some major restrictions, and you're like, well, you sure can't I just have like 10 minutes every day? And I think the answer is no. It's no. You're going to get more of the benefit and see more of the benefits if you just go cold turkey.
Yeah. I think it's important. You could just try it for the 2 months of bar study.
I mean, or even try it for a week. We're not asking for 2 months. Just give it a week.
Give it a week. See how it goes. You could do it during the week. You could even do it 5 days a week. It doesn't matter. Yeah. But just take like a serious break because you need to give your brain time to reset. And I think that, we both felt the withdrawal symptoms and the cravings of the ability to check social media. They aren't gone yet. It's been a week.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was the same when I quit my law firm job. I had like the phantom BlackBerry for a few days where I would just like reach for it because it was so. And I remember I'd quit my job. I was going to Tahoe and I'm in the backseat of my friend's car who's driving. And I'm literally like, where's my BlackBerry? And they're like, you quit your job. I'm like, oh God, you're right. Thank goodness. You're right. I did.
That's right.
But it took like 2 to 3 days before I was just like instinctively reaching for it.
Yeah. So once you have taken a break and given yourself the gift of 10 hours a week left, or 10 hours a week back, and that's just us. Go to your screen time usage on your phone and see how many hours you could get back. Then you want to calendar in some really important like chunks of deep work, which is no distractions, phone off, earplugs in. Like you can still take breaks. You can do the Pomodoro method, but you need to have solid amounts of time where you can find that flow. And without like saying that you're going to just really sit down and do that set time, it's unlikely that you're going to reach that state, which is the state where you become the most productive.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think for most people, that's got to be like 3 to 4 hours.
Yes, I agree. So it's really not that bad when you think of it that way. As you could say, like you come in, you sit down at 9 and you do a set till noon. Maybe it's 12:30 with some breaks. Then you go have lunch and you take an hour, maybe go for a walk, maybe like don't go check your phone for an hour, but like come up with something to do. And then you maybe, now what? It's like 2:00. You could do a 2 to 5 and then you could take another, break. And then you could do another 1 or 2 hours in the evening and then you could have dinner and then you are done for the day. You can find these hours, if your goal is to study 8 hours a day, you can find 8 hours without it feeling just soul crushing, especially if you get into that state of flow, the time will pass fairly quickly and you will just get your work done. I think the other thing that's interesting is with all those interruptions, your day is going to be much slower and laborious and it's going to be like yuckier to get through.
Yeah. And I think if somebody doesn't have time to study full time and you're working and studying, these sort of things become even more critical. So it's like, okay, maybe you can carve out, 2 hours a day during the week, but then on the weekends, you're going to do these longer blocks. And whatever it is, you've got to work with the time you have. But I do think this ability to say, okay, where in my schedule can I realistically sit down and do like some deep work is so important.
Yeah. Then to counteract the deep work, I liked this term that I saw in a book I read this weekend called radical downtime, is that you need to do nothing purposeful. So you need to have downtime that does not require focused thought. And it's supposed to be even better for our brains if that can include outside time. Because one of the arguments is that when we are in the outdoors, we don't scan and take in information as much as we do when we're in like a very busy place or a place that has a lot of information. So like parks or if you're in an urban environment, parks will get that for you. But when you're walking on even an urban street, you're taking in a lot of information. But in a more natural environment, you're not taking in as much information. And there is science to support that when you listen to leaves and birds and other things, that you're actually resetting your nervous system. And so your brain likes to be outside. It likes to take breaks from massive stimulation. So if you give it time to recharge, you're going to consolidate what you've learned and hopefully remember it better. And you're probably going to be in a better mental health space to go back and do the hard things again, which I think is one of the things that's really critical.
Interesting. Yeah, I have not read that book. I think I feel like something like cooking or something can also maybe like get people in that state. Just something that like, you have a little bit of focus on what you're doing, but you're not like massively worried about it. You're just like, oh, I'm chopping some onions and now I'm putting them in the thing and now they're starting to smell and I'm paying attention to that because I don't want to burn them. Anything like that. That also stuff that we've been doing for like thousands of years. Like, I don't want to go all like tech bro here, but there probably is some like benefit to the way that like we have done things for a long time.
Yeah, that's very true. So basically with less distractions, more focus and flow, you're going to be able to study less, which is going to leave you more times to do things other than study. And yay. And even if that's just TV watching, that's fine. If that is how you wind down to watch a good show with, a friend or a significant other, great. Take your dog for a walk. Perfect. Call a good friend. All of those things are really important. And you can get time back if you just make the most of your study time. And this pressure to study 12 hours a day is garbage. You do not need 12 hours a day of studying, especially if you are actually studying the hours that you're there working.
Yeah, because reality is no one can study 12 hours a day effectively. You're just wasting time at that point, and you're stressing yourself out, and you're making your life miserable, and you're probably destroying your body. And you don't have to do that to pass the bar exam. You really don't.
No. Can we take a moment to talk about Reddit just before because we've talked a lot about IG, because Reddit is not one of our internet drugs of choice.
Well, I know I go to the Invisalign one every day now, but that's very alarmist.
Yes. So there is good information to be found on Reddit. And Reddit can be a place where you can find information that will support whatever feelings you have, I really believe. So if, I check bar exam Reddit periodically, and if you want to just go down the deep path of like how you're going to hack the exam and all these predictions and who's got the right predictions and who was wrong with the predictions. And people call us and tell us this all the time. It's like, well, I saw on Reddit, and I'm like, please move away from the Reddit. Yeah. Like, it is a unique space where folks go when they're anxious, I feel like, to share information, but it's a lot of anxiety. So you have to be very, very careful with how you specifically use that during this time.
Yeah, and one thing that I've noticed on this totally unrelated Reddit is like there are a few people that post constantly that had like very bad experiences. And I'm sure that happened. I mean, mostly, I'm sure. I don't know. Probably, I'm willing to say, yes, that happened. You had a bad experience. But they're on like every thread. So if you're just a casual person who drops by and you're like, oh my gosh, that's so horrible. But like, that's not really like the norm.
Yeah, I know. It's just, you really have to be thoughtful about it. And again, it's a lot of information because very quickly you can read, 20 people's comments about something. And then the question you have to ask yourself is, did that serve me? Am I better off without it?
Yeah. Would I have been better off having that time back and not having this emotional reaction?
Yeah.
Probably yes. Because the reality is like, I mean, tons of people pass the bar who never look at Reddit. So you don't need to go to Reddit to pass the bar.
No. And I mean, some people say nice things about us on Reddit. So I appreciate
that. We hear that. Yeah, thank you.
We hear that.
Please say nice things. And occasionally we even think like, oh, we should go on Reddit and we're like, I just am not sure that's how I want to spend my time either.
I know.
And I even did a like Ask Me Anything thing like many moons ago. But eventually I got off Reddit, even though it wasn't like directly impacting my study. I just was like, oh, can't do it.
But let's just play the scenario out. So, you know, you're taking your lunch break and you decide that you're going to go, you know, read bar exam Reddit. And you get on a thread where people are just freaking out about technology use, you know, on the bar exam soft. It could be, you know, the predictions, it could be whatever. And then you spend an hour, which is very easy to do, consuming all of that anxiety and holding it in your body. And then you try to sit down to do focused work and find flow again. Do you think you're going to find your flow? No, because you're so heightened at that point. It is going to interrupt your ability to move forward. If you do that, please do some like serious breathing exercises to try and calm your nervous system, because that is just not going to serve you. We have to be able to show up as a pretty functioning person to get the maximum benefit of the time that we're putting in.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching. Please give us a like and subscribe. And you can visit barexamtoolbox.com for bar exam tutoring help. We would be happy to chat. See you soon.